Chinese warplanes have been crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait at an alarming rate. And this week, Beijing said there is no so-called median line. So to talk with me about this crisis is a top defense expert, Danjiang University Professor Alexander Huang. Professor Huang, are we on the brink of war?
The short answer is no.
No.
Because all parties involved understand that if there should be a war, there are signs that we can detect.
Such as what?
Especially when there are troops maneuvers, when there are different district or theaters are moving their equipment and personnel and weapon systems closer to the Taiwan Strait. Or in Taiwan, we can see the barracks and air bases. If we hear more, then there are something brewing. But basically, I don't think that the political agenda on all sides would allow a local war to take place. Having said all this, we cannot exclude what's so-called unintended incidents. And that's the true danger, but no one is planning for a real regional war.
So what if there were to be an accident up in the air? Do you think that could spark a war, a conflict?
Well, if everything is under control, if the chain of command is very clear, if the troops and pilots are trained well, then I have more trust in this game of messages. All these maneuvers were sending political messages, or we call that strategic communication, that we show our anger to the other side, or we want our opponents to understand our position. Unintended incident, however, is that when one or two operators or fighters that had a unusual, unexpected, unpredicted actions based on a personal problem or a inability to operate normally under stress. So it basically would be something outside of a plan. It's an accident, but it could trigger a larger military engagement.
Do you think that Taiwan has been handling this well?
I think actually I have very confidence in the Taiwan Air Force and sailors because we have very strict regulation and for a long time. Ever since the mid-90s, we are telling our frontline warriors that no first shot, okay? You don't fire at anyone until you are fired upon. This is very clear to all frontline troops. Number two, Taiwan comparatively is in the inferior position. So we had no intention to start it a kind of incident out of no reason. And number three is that the political agenda and the tensions across the Taiwan Strait had been already deteriorating. So we are even on a higher alert than normal times. So I believe that we have told all the frontline people, and they understand that very well. So personally, I worry more about the dangerous maneuver between other parties. But I have trust in Taiwan Air Force and Navy.
You're talking about politicians or Air Force pilots? Which dangerous maneuvers you're talking about?
Because we, even though when we are doing our combat air patrol or reconnaissance flight, we have a very strict regulation and maintain certain distance to avoid unintended thing. But when other parties, let's say the United States maritime airplanes or fighters or bombers are getting closer to the coastlines of China, and when China react, actually they were even more closer than what we are performing. So what I'm worrying about is incidents by other parties and that drag Taiwan into a conflict. That's what I'm worried about.
Well, recently the U.S. Undersecretary of State came to visit Taiwan, and this is when, this escalated a lot of response from China with all this military activity. So do you think that it's a response to the U.S.? Is there any other reason?
Yeah, it is. It was. I recall exactly 60 years ago when President Dwight Eisenhower visited Taipei and had meetings with President Chiang Kai-shek. Chairman Mao in Beijing ordered a artillery bombardment against the offshore island Quemoy for 3 days. Chairman Mao said it's a welcome artillery shell and also a bombardment to send off President Eisenhower. So the bombardment started when President Eisenhower landed, and the bombardment stopped after the airplane took off from Songshan International Airport. So it was very clear that 60 years ago, the Chinese wanted to send a message to President Eisenhower. And this year, twice, that they sent the message. I met with the American visitors and I congratulate them. And I said, your visit is actually presidential because Beijing used the same way to welcome you to Taiwan. Yeah.
So, well, what about the U.S.? Why do you think they're sending top officials to Taiwan? We saw 2 in the past 2 months. Is this a part of their strategy?
It could be several interpretations. One is that the United States said that we recognize the full-fledged democracy in Taiwan. We want to encourage the people of Taiwan. We want to ensure that Taiwan is not isolated. Taiwan has a firm friends from afar. So the visit itself is based on the merits of Taiwan democracy. It has nothing to do with anything else. Or other people can go to the other extreme saying that, this is campaign tactics for President Trump to run his re-election. And so within this spectrum, there could be several different interpretations. Of course, I believe that the United States is still very firm about its own one China policy. I do not believe that the United States wanted to antagonize Beijing and push them to the extreme. I believe that the United States really want to rebalance the cross-strait situation because China is becoming stronger and the United States believe that their help or their encouragement can bring the cross-strait gap into a new, different rebalance situation.
But this is increasing military tensions across the strait.
Yes.
And do you think that China could attack us because they don't want the U.S. coming so close to us?
Yeah, I think the message has been very clear that China wanted to signal Washington that do not send senior officials to Taiwan. Remember that which party has the full diplomatic relationship you are with. And China has to be challenged by its one China principle. But on the other hand, we have to say that Beijing cannot dictate foreign policy of other countries. Every country will act and speak based on their own calculation and protect their own interests. If there is something that Beijing is extremely unhappy or cannot bear upon, you better open a talk with Washington. It has nothing to do with the people on Taiwan, and we do not want to see that Taiwan being a victim in this great power competition.
And Beijing did say this week that there is no so-called median line of the Taiwan Straits. Is that a change in policy?
The answer should be yes and no. Based on our understanding of international law, one country can only react fearfully or to use force to defend itself when your territorial airspace is infringed upon. Median line, or whatever people call ADIZ, Air Defense Identification Zone, it carries no position in international law. So when we heard the news and say, oh, the Chinese fighter jets get into the southwestern corner of our ADIZ, or they cross the median line of the Taiwan Strait, the most we can say is that China is not observing a status quo, or they try to confront against a status quo. But we cannot say that they violate the international law, because the airspace of Taiwan Strait is open, common for all countries. Not only Taiwan or China fighter jets, other countries can also fly their military vehicle through the Taiwan Strait. It's outside of Taiwan territorial airspace. The median line is a line of alert, a line of possible response, a line of psychological defense. So we do not like to see that the median line is not observed by the other side. The median line is also based on goodwill. So if both sides of the Taiwan Strait are willing to show the goodwill, or at least observe a tacit understanding that we do not use military force to resolve political differences, then we can maintain such a median line. You cannot bring the case of last week or anything into an international court. It doesn't stand.
But it is true that China is becoming more belligerent because they're not respecting this median line anymore.
Well, I will begin by saying that China is now more proactive because after Xi Jinping became the leader of China, he wanted to introduce a stronger ingredient or essence of nationalism. He wanted to show the mainland people that China is now strong and can express freely in at least the regional affairs. Yes, it's more belligerent compared to the behavior before. And it should not be welcome or encouraged. We don't know whether there is a perimeter for such a belligerent action. If China continue to push, then there will be a time that one day, someone will pull the trigger or push the button. So the maintaining a kind of mutual understanding is very important. What I want to say is that median line is something that psychologically we feel safe. But the real work that we need to do is to correct a kind of state of no communication. When we have more military activities in our vicinity area, the number one issue for me as an expert is that the parties involved should have hotlines or communication lines. So we can verify actions, we can call each other to avoid misperception and misunderstanding. We have a way to explain to the other side that it was a mistake, it was an unintended thing, it's not a big deal, or we apologize. So when we don't have such a communication line, so the communication were only through newspaper, statement, or military actions, that brings up the potential of conflict.
We don't have a hotline.
We don't.
Yeah. So much of the increased military tensions have been because of improving U.S.-Taiwan ties. So what do you think China would see as the U.S. and Taiwan crossing the medium line in improving their relationship that would provoke, a very big reaction from China?
Yeah, I think there are several key landmines on the red lines that if United States and Taiwan together to cross that line, then it will trigger the landmine. One is to give Taiwan a formal recognition. That would be interpreted as Taiwan independence or to create two Chinas. Another big landmine would be the United States' decision to station military force on Taiwan Island. And that will be probably the end.
The beginning of the end.
Of the trust
Okay.
Between Washington and Beijing. There are something approaching to that red line. For instance, based on humanitarian assistance that the United States military assets, airplanes or warships seeking assistance from Taiwan or try to have a short visit to our military facility for humanitarian reasons or mechanical issues. These are irritating for Beijing for sure, but we don't know how they're going to react to that because it's all conditional, depending on the form, the format, and the time duration. I think there are smart ways to do it, to approach and create a better U.S.-Taiwan relationship. You got to be smart to walk around the red line, but not to touch on the landmines.
Do you think it is in Chinese President Xi Jinping's on his agenda to take over Taiwan?
Well, ever since the creation of the People's Republic, that has been the sacred mission that they need to do it. Chairman Mao did not deliver that. Deng Xiaoping couldn't do it. And Xi Jinping, of course, in his agenda, he wanted to see some kind of improvement, if not total solution, of the cross-strait political differences. But sometimes I used to say that there are questions that needs to be asked in church, not in classrooms, because only God knows the answer. I firmly believe that that we cannot determine when, by what means, that the cross-strait issue will be resolved entirely. But I also firmly believe that we can maintain peace if we are committed. If we are committed, we can ensure each other that that even with extreme unhappiness and anger, we do not use force to resolve problems. We will have to maintain non-interrupted communication I think these are the things that we need to do. In short, I think unification is something that could be determined by God, but peace can be maintained by people across the Taiwan Strait.
Well, thank you very much. I've been speaking with top defense expert, Danjiang University, Professor Alexander Huang.